Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Leviticus spot. It's tempting to say leave the best till last, but I guess you can be the judge of that when we get to morning tea. Joined by Carl here this morning. We hopefully will be joined by Katie, who couldn't make it today. And if the world doesn't implode by having three Leviticus nerds gathered in the one place at the one time, we hope to tease out some things in relation to the book of Leviticus. Because it might surprise you, but there are many people out there who think that Leviticus has no real relevance for Christian life and ministry. I know, it's shocking, isn't it? But it is true. And so what we want to turn to in these slots is to think about why the church needs Leviticus. And yet that's not an abstract idea kind of debated by armchair theologians who kind of sit back and ponder and muse. Maybe we do that too. But Carl, you were a pastor for many, many years. Do you want to take us back to the very start of that and tell us what you did and why?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 11 years ago, it was almost 11 years ago to the day, almost. But I started as minister at a church in Launceston, and I had to decide what I was going to preach through. And I thought to myself, I'm going to preach through Leviticus. Yeah, so what a great way to start a ministry. So I'd done an honours project on Hebrews, and Hebrews, of course, reaches right back into the Old Testament. As I did that, I just realised how some of these themes from Leviticus really open up the gospel. And so I said, no, I'm going to preach through Leviticus. And actually one person said to me, this is slightly depressing, but and encouraging at the same time, about 8 years into my ministry, they said, I think your Leviticus sermons were the best you ever did. Yeah. Look, but one of the reasons I love it, and as I preached it, I came to love it more, and that is because I think Leviticus, I call it the picture book of the Old Testament, because it puts the wonder of the gospel and the truth of human reality in ordinary clothes and in the clothes of lived experience. And it's just wonderful. I said to Jeff and Katie the other day, Michael Wilcock calls Revelation a sacrament of the imagination, to stir the heart and set the soul ablaze or something like that. And I reckon Leviticus is going to take that trophy.
It may well do. And it's funny, you think like starting a, kind of your pastoral ministry, turning to the book of Leviticus, kind of high stakes game maybe, and yet surprisingly not all that uncommon. If Katie was here, would have got her to talk about her experience where she was part of a church planting team. And they thought, for starting up a new church plant, we're going to run an integrated adults and kids ministry, all looking at the same thing together. What will we start with? And you can probably guess what the answer was. The book of Leviticus. Because again, just recognizing how powerful this is to God's people. We had an intensive running here last week looking at the book of Leviticus, and it was interesting how some of that kind of potential for Leviticus to paint pictures and images kind of arose as people grappled with that. Thinking particularly of the Day of Atonement, where you imagine yourself as an average Israelite. You've got no access to the tent, you've no idea what's going on in there, and yet Leviticus 16 brings you in. It's almost like you've got a dash cam on the high priest, following him around as he does his thing within the tent, so that you can see. And you think, well, why do we need to see that? Why do we need these pictures of going through that? Well, it's a number of things, but I think it's God wanting you not to be unsure of what's going on. This is not magical, it's not superstitious, there's not some kind of secret handshakes going on in there. You're meant to know that God has acted on your behalf by doing these things to provide a way for you to enjoy fellowship with Him. And so like Carl was saying, it's just so rich with these pictures that are really useful.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful point, Jeff, because often people say, we need, it's just the Bible's dry propositions, and we need more stories and we need more visual communication. And it's just, Leviticus is the book of visual communication. It opens our minds through our imaginations to understand the riches of the gospel. It just so happens that I brought a book.
I can see you brought a prop.
I'm just going to interrupt you to take this moment. A book has just come out, washed by God. But like,
Who's that book by?
a top author, a really great author. But look, I mean, one of the things, this is a book about baptism, but it begins in Leviticus, and it begins with the images there. And I love to go to Leviticus actually to share the gospel. I say to someone, say to kids, you know, you go out into the yard, you get dirty, you're filthy, you know, and what does mum say? You can't come back into the house until you're cleaned up. You know, otherwise you're going to trample dirt all through the house, and that's what God has to do to us. We're filthy, not because of the dirt in the backyard, but because of our sin. And we've got to take a shower, but we need a shower that only God can do, and that shower comes through Jesus. So, that's Leviticus, and that speaks to kids. It speaks to people who are not Christians. What a book!
And so there's something for everybody to do as we continue our series through Leviticus. What pictures is this book presenting? How is it wanting to stir your imagination, to create desire within you for what it has on offer and what it's holding out? And then what people in your lives can you bring to those pictures and images in order for God to speak to them? So there's the challenge for today. The church needs Leviticus. There's installment number 1.